Good evening, and welcome to First Wednesday at Faith. We are so glad that you have joined us tonight, whether you're here in person or you're joining us via live stream. We are glad to have you be participating tonight as we take on this topic of Love Seeks to Understand, breaking down racism in our city and in our hearts. And so this is a really important topic, one that we thought was really appropriate during the month of February. It's a month when we talk a lot about love, and it's also a month when we as a nation look at our Black history. And so we thought it was a good time for us really to take on this particular topic. Those of you who've been part of First Wednesday know that our goal is to take on topics that matter to all of us, not from a standpoint of we have the right answers, but a standpoint of these are things we need to be aware of, we need to be having conversations about, and so we're trying to bring in resources and experts and people who can help us take on the tough topics. And so if you've been with us, you know that back this fall, we started out by talking about addiction and recovery, and we partnered with Wayside Recovery Center. You know that we had the opportunity to talk about trying to connect our teens in a disconnected world, and we brought you a teen panel along with Access as a resource for parents. We also, in December, delved into the whole idea of mental health and mental illness, and what does it mean to live with that? And so we brought in speakers that could talk to that, some therapists. We also featured our own Steve Zayer and his story and his book that he's written about life living with mental illness with his wife who had that. And then in January, we started to address the whole issue of food insecurity and what that means here in our community. And we partnered with ICA to look at that in more depth. Tonight, we are really pleased to be partnering with the Minnetonka Police Department, bringing in Officer Scott Marks, as a way for us to understand the realities of racism here in Minnetonka. And then we're also going to be taking a look at a video that comes as a documentary from PBS, a portion of that looks at how we got here, some of the history of our Twin Cities area and some of the things that make racism systemic here, and to help us understand a bit of that. Then we'll talk a little bit about the circles of influence and circles of control. What can we do as individuals? And again, our agenda is not to promote any kind of a political agenda or anything else. It's simply to help us begin to have the conversation. Because we want to inspire hope and change lives through the love of Jesus Christ. And we think that begins by coming around the table and talking to one another. So with that, we're going to open tonight with some live music from David Rice. And so David, go ahead and start us off.
Thank you. Isn't it just like heaven when you walk into the room? There's not a thing that's hid when every eye is on you. Can't get enough of your presence. It's the perfect point of view. Isn't it just like heaven? Ooh, come a little closer, stay a little longer. Ooh, I can't get enough of you. Come a little closer, stay a little longer. I can't get enough of you. Doesn't it sound like heaven when you're singing over me? There's not a voice more constant. Your melodies, they never cease. Here I would stand in your presence, in my true identity. Doesn't it sound like, it sounds like, just like heaven. Ooh, forever. Holy, you are holy. I'll lay down any treasure for us to be together. Holy, you are holy. You're such a perfect Father. I'll worship you forever. Holy, you are holy. I'll lay down any treasure for us to be together. Oh, oh, come a little closer, stay a little longer. Oh, oh, I can't get enough of you. Oh, oh, come a little closer, stay a little longer. Oh, oh, I can't get enough of you. Oh, enough of you. I can't get enough. Can't get enough of you. Can't get enough. I can't get enough. I can't get enough of you. 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 Ooh, come a little closer, stay a little longer. Ooh, I can't get enough of you. Come a little closer, stay a little longer. Ooh, I can't get enough of you.
Well, good evening, everybody. We wanted to take just a minute and give you an idea of some of the things that are going on here at Faith. Blake and I will give you a quick update on some of those. And the first one is that 2 weeks from tonight is Ash Wednesday. And so we will be having our Ash Wednesday service right here in the sanctuary at 6:30. And we will also be streaming it live. And as part of the service, we will be imparting ashes on those who wish to receive that. And if you're at home and you're going to be watching and streaming it from home, if you'd like to use some ashes at home when we get to that part of the service, we just invite you to stop by the office. We've got little vials of ashes for you to pick up, and you can use them during the service. So take advantage of that, and we'll see everyone back here for Ash Wednesday in a couple weeks. So.
Great. You know, we talk a lot about sharing the love of Christ here, and one of my favorite ways to share the love of Christ is with food.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to remind folks that we open our doors not only on First Wednesdays to the community, not only for worship at 10 o'clock on Sundays, but also on the third Thursday of every month, we offer a free meal for the community. It's a warm meal to go during COVID times, but if you find yourself in need of food or just want to see some smiling faces and get a meal, please stop out on the third Thursday of February at about 5:30 and we'll serve you up.
And also, we've got, during the season of Lent, we're going to try something that we've done. We have kind of a history of doing soup suppers before we get started at 6:30. Well, what we're going to do is we're just going to try that virtually. So we're going to gather on Zoom at 6 o'clock from 6 to 6:30 and invite you to eat with us. If not, that's fine. But it's really about a quick devotional that I'll be doing for us, and then an opportunity to just spend some time talking and getting to know and being with each other on Zoom. So we will hope you'll take advantage of that, and we'll see everybody during Lent for our virtual soup suppers. I know you're going to be there, right?
Of course, of course. One other thing, you know, Faith is a very busy church. There's a lot going on. The best way to stay up to date with everything going on here is to sign up for our e-newsletter. That comes out 5 days a week, and it comes out 5 days a week because each day Buck does a short devotional to give you a little bit of inspiration for your day. Steve adds a little bit of music to that, and it's just a good way to start the day, stay up to date with what's going on at Faith, and be looped into our ministry here. So if you're interested in that, reach out to Ann at the office. She's at Ann@faithchurchmn.org is the email address, and she can get you signed up.
And then one last thing we want to let you know about is that as we continue to build a relationship with Eisenhower Elementary School here in Hopkins, they've reached out to us and asked if we have some folks who would love to do some reading to our students over Zoom while they're in school. And so if that's something that would fit into your schedule and would be interested, we would love to have you do that. And I know the folks at Eisenhower it would be great. So if that is something you can do, all we do is ask you to email Debbie at faithchurchmn.org, and she can get you set up with a time to spend some time on Zoom reading to our students at Eisenhower. So I hope you can take advantage of that as well. Just some of the things that are going on, but let's turn back now to the topic at hand, and let's talk about what it means to love one another in our community. So Deb?
Thanks, Pastor Buck. Yes, and I have the privilege of introducing Officer Scott Marks, and we are so glad to have him with us tonight. Scott Marks, we have come to know in the last 3 years, really, as he is the head of the Minnetonka Faith Leaders, and he does a lot of other things too. He is Minnetonka's community engagement officer, but we have gotten to know him as he has brought people from across all the different faiths together to be addressing issues just like this. And we've asked him to come and talk a little bit about the realities of racism here and kind of what's going on with the Race and Equity Initiative as well. So, Officer Scott.
Thank you, Pastor Debbie. I appreciate the invitation to come tonight. This is a topic that's actually dear to my heart. I have a multiracial family, and I have many friends that are very diverse, right? I have friends that are, if we talk just faiths, right, that are from different faiths. I have rabbis that are friends. I have Muslim friends. But even still, I have so many friends that are black, Mexican, Asian, and so it's dear to me because I see the effects of racism on them. And my background too is I've been with the Minnetonka Police Department now for 18 years. I got 20 years total in law enforcement. And I also have a master's degree in social work and a bachelor's degree in social work. So I'm that social worker cop that everybody talks about. One of the things that I do here as part of my job as the community service or community engagement officer for the city of Minnetonka is I gather the faith leaders together. I talk about topics like this. I get involved in topics like racism. I get involved in topics like, crime prevention type stuff. I get involved in topics of mental health. Because of my background, I also happen to be a therapist as well. So I'm happy to hear that you guys were having that series on mental health as well. And so that's also something that's very dear to my heart. But when we talk about racism and we talk about it we see it in the news. We see it as lightning rod of police, right? And the engagement that police officers have with their communities. And I'd like to say this, the officers in Minnetonka have a fantastic relationship with our community, and our communities of color as well. And so it's not just the community in general, but individual communities of color and of different ethnic backgrounds. We have a fantastic relationship with them, and that's something that we're very open for. And we want to receive people. We want people to feel welcome. We want them to feel safe in our community. And in spite of that, we still see racism played out here in Minnetonka. And it's very covert in Minnesota. And when I talk to my black friends or my Mexican friends or my Asian friends, and what they tell me is they go down south, they know what to expect. They know what's going to happen. It's very in your face. People tell you it like it is. But in Minnesota, it's very covert. And Minnetonka is no different. And what does that look like? It looks like a number of different things, right? I can't tell you the amount of 911 calls that I've responded to about somebody suspicious in the neighborhood, somebody suspicious walking down the street, or somebody suspicious around a house, and to only go there and find out that it's a black male. Maybe a black male even wearing a utility company uniform. Very conspicuous. I mean, they're just there. They have a van. Everything's marked. And the only reason that I can assume why I was called there was because of this person's race. And I stop and I talk to them because I feel like if I just was to drive by, and then I'm just filling in that other stereotype that police are somehow watching, right? But then I stop by and I have conversations with these people, and I say, hey, I just got a call on you. And the look on their face is something that they've experienced before. It's nothing new to them. And I've talked to them about it, and I said, hey, I'm guessing you've been called on before. I say, yeah, they have. And I can only assume it's because I'm a black male. Yeah. And so that's what's happened in here. That's that covert racism that we see. I even had a call one time where there was, the person literally said to our dispatchers that they were concerned because it was a Hispanic male walking down the street and he didn't have a shovel. And to hear that, and of course they called in anonymously, so we didn't have any information to call this person back. But to be used as somebody's racist tool is very difficult for somebody like myself, right? Who has friends and family that aren't white. And so it's very difficult for me to see and experience that and to be able to deal with that and not to be able to confront it because it's covert at times. Other times it's not so covert. One of our churches just down the street, Destiny Hill, right off of Destiny Hill Church, right off of Baker Road and Highway 7 here, within the last 2 years had experienced some outward racism and xenophobia because they are a predominantly African immigrant church. Fantastic, wonderful, welcoming, warm people. And yet they had a neighbor of theirs who was damaging their property and leaving notes on their doors, very racist notes that were left on their doors. Thankfully, due to the wonderful work of the Minnetonka Police Department, we were able to find out who it was. And we were able to arrest that person, get charges, and within the last month, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, it actually had the sentencing hearing for that person. So we were very thankful to walk that journey with our community at Destiny Hill and to hear their joy in being able to work with us, work with the prosecutor's office, and to have a restorative piece to their to the healing of this terrible thing that happened to them in their community. It was amazing, you know, and just to be a part of that was, for me, a wonderful experience. I hate it though. I don't want to have to go through that experience with somebody, but that's something that we face here, even in Minnetonka. We also face anti-Semitism. We have a large Jewish population that lives here. I have many friends that are Jewish, right? And to see them walk out of their home or walk down the street and see a posting on a telephone pole or a light pole or something like that that says, you know, something that's anti-Semitic, just disheartening. And it's something that they have to deal with and they have to face. It's a reality for them. But to know that, it hurts, right? It hurts. Now, I have the privilege, so to speak, of being able to walk through life and not have to deal with that stuff. I experience it secondhand, for the most part, through my friends and my family, and those folks in our city that deal with it. I have a black friend that I'll go out to lunch with every few months in town here, and it's when I'm working, right? And right now I'm wearing what I call a soft uniform, right? It's not the full uniform that a patrol officer would wear, but oftentimes I'll even wear that, and he and I will go out to lunch. I often get looked at, you know, differently when a police officer walks in. You know, everybody notices, right? Oh man, the cops are here, right? I didn't do it. I know you didn't, right? But it's a very different feel. It's a very different look that we get when it's me and my black male friend walking into a restaurant together. It's very different. Almost like something out of Star Wars. People don't know how to see it. They don't know how, what is this black man doing with this police officer? Right? I've also responded to calls where black people are the victims of maybe a theft, something, nothing really dangerous or anything like that, but maybe a theft. And I've been talking to them, and I've had people come up and ask if they were okay. If they were okay. And I ask them, well, how does that make you feel? That makes me feel like I'm subordinate to them, like I need their help. That's what I'm told. And so, racism in Minnetonka, in the state, is very covert. And again, like I said, my friends that have gone down south or came from down south have these different experiences. Right? It's very overt down there. It's in their face. So there's some work being done around the cities. Around the city here, right? We have tonight, I'm a speaker for this, and in a few minutes you'll get to watch a really wonderful a piece of the Jim Crow of the North documentary. And it's really wonderful, and if you have an opportunity to watch the whole thing, I highly recommend it. Another one of our churches in town, St. Luke's, is actually running an anti-racism series. And Pastor Debbie, you're in there. And we go through that, and we work it as white people trying to do this work. What does it look like? What does that look like for me to be able to do this work and this anti-racism work? What does it look like for Pastor Debbie? What does it look like for each of us? And it's a wonderfully guided series that they have developed at the church. And so that's one of the things that's going on, and hopefully they continue to do it. I think it's a highly valuable resource for our community. Within the city, we have worked on developing some different things, right? My position was kind of created out of a need for this, a need to be able to communicate better with our city, with our citizens, with our residents, with our people that worship in our city, people that work in our city. Alongside that, we were also working to develop a number of different things at the city level. So it's not just the police department, because we know that our city government represents us really more than any other government entity in our lives, right? We look at what happens at the federal level, and boy, that's important, right? But what happens at our city level is very important to us. It affects us. It affects our daily lives. It affects where we live. It affects how we drive. All these things, where we go to. And so the city's working on a few different avenues of doing that. Internally, within the city as employees, we have a diversity and equity committee that we're working on. We've been developing and working through the last several months. And we're also looking to see, how does this work look with the city engaging with the community? How do we do this work as a community? How does the city's role take that? And I know, because of working with our faith leaders, that there's wonderful things going on in our community, and there's lots of hot spots of it. What if the city was part of that? How do we engage that work? Just quickly, right back to the police department too, because I know, hey, we're lightning rods for a lot of this. I get it. I understand it. There's a lot of things historically that law enforcement's been a part of. And we've worked hard to try to correct that. And I know in our department we're doing things right. Even before there was mandates for implicit bias training and multicultural training, we were already doing that in our department. And we're continuing that work. And in fact, this month we are doing more implicit bias work. And if you're not familiar with implicit bias, take a look. Look it up. There's some fantastic videos out there on YouTube, or information that you can research on implicit bias. Something that, as a therapist, I understand very well. So I love teaching it as well. And then finally, coming up on February 18th is going to be the Hopkins Race and Equity Initiative, which, hey, just across the border, and I'm sure many of you are Hopkins residents as well. But this is an initiative that has been going on for several years now, and it's a relationship between local faith community, Hopkins Police Department, and City of Hopkins. And they hold forums several times a year, and actually there's one coming up here, again, February 18th, and Minnetonka Chief Borboom, St. Louis Park Chief Mike Harsey, and then Hopkins Police Chief Brent Johnson will be there to kind of discuss some of these things. What does it look like? What does policing look like today? And I can tell you, in the 22 years I've been a police officer, it looks really different. It looks very different. And how is it going to look in the future? It's going to continue to change. It's going to continue to evolve. Just like anything, as people, right? As people of faith, we grow, and we need to. We need to work to be better all the time. And so it will be a virtual forum, so you'll be able to join that. It's coming up again on February 18th at 6:30 p.m. And so there's some links here that you can see if you're logged in virtually here to see this. You'll be able to take a look. If you don't have an opportunity to see it right now, just go to the Hopkins Race and Equity Initiative. If you Google that, it'll pop up, and you should find this next event. No, Pastor Debbie had asked that I reserve a few moments to have some questions, so a little short Q&A. And does anybody have any questions?
I just had a quick question. Can you share the charges and outcome of the Destiny Hill situation?
Yeah, so for those of you that are watching, the question was if I could share the charges and the outcome. And so the charges were felony level, damage to property with the bias intent. And so that's like a harassment and a stalking charge that was added onto that as well. It was, with the approval of the Destiny Hill community, reduced to misdemeanor level. I believe it was a gross misdemeanor level. They were allowed to reduce that charge, and then there was also an agreement that the person wouldn't be, around anymore, but they've moved out of state. So that's thankfully, it's not something that they will have to deal with from that person in the future. So, good question. Thank you. Any other questions?
I would just say that you're open to lots of questions. You just returned, I believe, from being out in D.C. as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've been facing all different kinds of things. Do you believe that as we're moving from 2020 to 2021, are you seeing things continue to escalate now? Or like in Minnetonka, are things settling from what they were last summer as far as bias calls and all of that kind of stuff?
So Pastor Debbie was wondering if you weren't able to hear her, or if you're watching online, she's wondering if I was recently in Washington D.C. for the inauguration as part of the security team. So the Metro D.C. Police Department puts out a call across the nation for departments that want to come and be part of the inauguration and kind of help be part of the security force. And so Minnetonka Police Department sent 8 officers, including Chief Borboom and myself. And with our other area departments, we sent 43 total, just from our local cities around us. And so we were part of that, and what an amazing experience that was, and what an eerie experience it was as well. And so the city was a ghost town. It was crazy. It was like one of these post-apocalyptic type movies, and you're waiting for the zombie horde to come running around the buildings, but they weren't there, thankfully. Right? But it was an eerie experience as well. To have 4,000 police officers from across the country on Pennsylvania Avenue, and nobody else there to celebrate, right? The inauguration of a president. It was an eerie feeling because of COVID restrictions, obviously, but then what happened at the Capitol. And so Pastor Debbie's wondering if from 2020, last summer, to now, if we're seeing things kind of maybe level off or calm down as far as the bias and racist stuff that we're seeing. And I think it's a little early to judge that. It's a little early to see what's going to happen, because we know there's trials coming up that are very, very important to this topic, right? And as law enforcement, we're holding our breath, so to speak. We're hoping for peaceful protests and not what had happened throughout the summer. And so we're curious to kind of see. And we know that when things like that happen, some of these racist things start to occur again, right? And
Scott?
it's very difficult.
We have a question online from Janet, and she asks, do you do any work in the Minnetonka schools?
So in the Minnetonka School District, we have a school resource officer. Pete Carlson, Detective Pete Carlson is our school resource officer at the high school. And so he's, involved in doing, security and crime investigation and stuff with juveniles there. But as far as doing outreach and talking like this to our students, we can do that. We can. And so that's something that I could help to do, or Detective Carlson, as he's available, he's also able to do that as well.
Well, thank you, Officer Scott. We are so grateful that you would take the time out to come tonight, and I know this was your day off, so thank you. We also want to thank the Minnetonka Police Department for providing you to be here tonight as well, so we really do appreciate that. I think it's important for us to realize that there are these crimes of bias, and the fact that you spoke about them being covert is something that I think we can kind of go through life, especially if we are part of the predominant culture, and not know that even this is all going on. And I think it's important for us to understand this is around us, and to step into it and to help bring an end to this kind of thing. So really appreciate your being here tonight, and just want to thank you again for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we acknowledge that this is a reality, even right here in Minnetonka, we want to look at a little bit of the history of how we get to these places. And this documentary is one that was shared with us, I think as faith leaders, or it might have been through the Dismantling Racism class. But it's one that helps us understand what underlies the Twin Cities, just some of the historical things that we've had. We're taking just a portion, about 8 minutes, out of the documentary that is on PBS called Jim Crow of the North. I want you just to listen and to hear kind of what is part of our history.
And now, through the use of a National Housing Act insured mortgage, is brought within the reach of all citizens on a monthly payment.
In the midst of the New Deal, when the FDR administration is looking for ways to try to stabilize the housing market, the Fair Housing Act is passed in 1934. And as part of that, the Homeowners Loan Corporation is also established, with the hope that if you could establish long-term mortgages with fixed interest rates, you could create pathways to homeownership for most Americans.
This time they can buy this house with monthly payments that are less than they now spend for rent.
When the FHA starts underwriting mortgages in the 1930s, this really is a game changer in a lot of ways. It takes a lot of risk off the banks, it places it onto the federal government, and now working class, middle class families, they're able to purchase a home.
Unfortunately, as part of that, what the HOLC does is it establishes designations for neighborhoods based on the occupants of those neighborhoods.
And this is where the term redlining comes into place. The FHA, they made color-coded maps of all the largest cities in the United States, and they broke cities down into 4 different areas. Red is considered hazardous, that's the worst. Yellow is considered definitely declining, blue is considered still desirable, and green is considered the best.
And what's so powerful about this kind of scale of measuring investment, it was about values and people.
The fact of the matter is that there was no evidence that those people who lived in those communities, predominantly black and brown people and foreign-born people, would have defaulted on loans.
There are no firm realities behind the close proximity to blackness and your property values going down. That's just not true.
The FHA is being very upfront and very explicit in how they're linking spatial desirability with racial occupancy. It's this racialization of space idea. So areas that were predominantly African American or majority minority, or really in a lot of cases, even if there's a few non-white people there, that's often enough to be redlined. So when they built these maps, they also explained why each area got the ranking it did.
The area around 4th Avenue South, which is called the Old South Side. This was a nice area, it had nice homes. It's the historic African American neighborhood on the south side of Minneapolis.
This one part of South Minneapolis was redlined specifically due to, and I'm quoting, a gradual infiltration of Negroes and Asiatics. The FHA refused to give an area a green-lined designation. Again, this is the best designation that they'll offer unless, and I'm quoting again, restrictive covenants are already in place. That line's from the FHA underwriting manual. Racial covenants aren't just about discriminating against people of color. It's about enriching white people. And I think that's the part that often gets lost in this narrative. And I think it does speak to the ways that white supremacy have been embedded in really built structures and built environments. I mean, if your grandparents bought a home on Minnehaha Creek, you know, that home's worth, what, $500,000? If your grandparents rented an area that was redlined and then subsequently destroyed by a freeway project, you know, you're not inheriting anything.
In a lot of ways, the practice of redlining, which didn't start until the 1930s, institutionalized and spread racial covenants all over the country because suddenly developers got sanction, they got direction from the federal government saying, this is best practices if you want to have a really high rating from us, if you want to get the most favorable terms for any loans.
By kind of de-integrating Minneapolis, which in many ways is what racial covenants are doing, this set the stage and enabled all these subsequent systems of inequality to really take hold.
This very persistent myth that northern cities never had formal segregation. The South had Jim Crow, and look at those signs. Well, racial covenants did the work of Jim Crow in the North, all over the North.
Many whites simply were not aware that there was a segregation. So many people in Minneapolis would be outraged what they thought that their friend was being discriminated against. They knew something was happening, but it wasn't happening to your friend. That was what kind of this mixed kind of a situation that we had in Minneapolis. I mean, if you could imagine these people, their parents sent me cookies and, you know, cakes all during the war. And I was welcome in their house. There was no question about it. And then there's other people who were just absolutely Klansmen. You know, that was what Minneapolis was all about.
But that was my generation in Minneapolis. We were hemmed in that ghetto, and that was our life. That was our world.
The 1935 land use planning map used to define which place would get mortgages versus others circled these areas, called them slums, places where the quote-unquote Negroes lived. These are places to avoid, right? So they're going to give you substandard housing and they're going to contain you. Access to affordable housing was a challenge. When you think about the reasons behind the creation of public housing, we had a lot of folks forced to the low-wage sector, right? And you're thinking about what jobs or opportunities that low-income folks of color even had access to at this time. You know, I would argue that with the creation of public housing in 1938, with the Sumner Field homes, became this really interesting iteration of the redesign of space. You have 400 units of public housing, which were segregated at the time, created. In 1953, the City Council of Minneapolis refused to scatter another 1,000 units of public housing outside of the Sumner Field Homes area. And where did these pressures come from? You had both internal conservative politicians and outlying suburban communities coming in saying, not in my neighborhood. And the City Council crumbled under the pressure and then took what was 400 units of public housing to over 1,000 units in less than a decade. They have strategically manufactured urban poverty.
this history is very personal for me. I'm a third-generation Minneapolitan. My grandparents were immigrants from Sweden who came to this country with nothing, worked incredibly hard jobs, but both sets of my grandparents in 1942 were able to buy houses in South Minneapolis. These houses were in a part of the city that was blanketed by racial covenants. Because of those racial covenants, my parents grew up in neighborhoods that were entirely white. And in many ways, they described them as a paradise for children. They had wonderful parks. They had really solid schools that sent them to college. But no one in their neighborhood ever talked about the fact that this neighborhood was only for white people. And I want everyone with this map to imagine themselves in this landscape of privilege and disenfranchisement.
I think it's really interesting to begin to understand some of the history that is behind us as a city as we look back on things that were boiling and burning last summer. I think it helps to have some understanding of the history that is around us. It's interesting to hear from Nelson Pirrie as he spoke about his experience before the war and then after the war in being accepted and not accepted. And I think it's interesting to hear the Swedish immigrant-born woman speaking about the privilege and how from an area of privilege, we often don't see all else that's going on. And so tonight, as we think about this, I think for all of us, there's huge tension that comes with that. And there's kind of a, well, what would I do about it anyway, and how do I do these things? And so I want us to think in terms of this graphic that's up here. And this is something that psychologists and sociologists use for a lot of different reasons, but I think it's a really good place for us as we think about all the issues that are on our plates these days. There are these things that concern us, and obviously all of this should concern all of us. But just as this past 2020 has taught us, you can't listen to all the news feeds, you can't listen to everything that keeps coming at you and keep taking that in, because it does concern us all, but you don't have control over all of those things, right? So what we need to do is we need to move to that next inner circle and say, okay, where are the places where I have influence, where I can make a difference, where I might be able to help bring change if change is needed about something. And so that's called our circle of influence. And that might be a situation where you learn about a law that's being proposed and you're of age to vote, and so you can go and vote, you have influence. It might be something where you are a person of privilege and you can begin to understand someone who isn't. So those are our areas of influence. But the area where we want to talk about tonight is the circle of control. And the circle of control is the place where you have control over behavior, over thoughts, and over actions. And so the place where you have absolute control comes back to you. And so that's what we want to do tonight, is we want to begin to think about what can I change about the way I see the world? What are the things that I have control over? Because I can't change anyone else, but I can change the ways that I think, the ways that I act, and the ways that I feel. And so that's the place where we need to begin from, is if we really love one another, to really begin saying, I want to seek to understand. And so I want to give us a few steps just to walk through. The first step is awareness. So tonight we heard some things. We learned about racial realities and bias realities right here in Minnetonka. And maybe some of you knew that went on, maybe some of you that's brand new news about what's been going on. And so I want us to say, I need to be aware of the things going on around me. And then the other piece is self-awareness. How have I been responding? Have I seen? Have I known? Have I had my eyes opened to all of this? or have I been able to just continue on in my bubble and not necessarily worry about other people? And then after we're aware of what's going on, the next piece is to listen and to learn. And so to just open yourself up to opportunities like this, the opportunity that Officer Marks talked about, to just hear what other people are going through, to begin to understand their experience. And then the third thing, if you can go back one slide still, sorry. The third thing is to begin to take action. After you've listened, after you've learned, then take action. But don't take action just because you think, well, I'm supposed to do something. Really begin to understand and be aware of the full issue and be aware of how you're coming to that. And then the great place to start is with welcoming someone who is different from you. Spending some time sitting down, maybe having coffee, maybe just talking about their experience and listening. And I think that's a great place for us to start. If you are looking for a way that maybe tonight you've heard some new things, then I'd like to propose these 4 steps for you. The first one is the Mapping Prejudice Project. So this is a project that came out of the University of Minnesota. And you can go online at mappingprejudice.umn.edu and look at the whole Twin Cities area. I think they've completed Hennepin County. I think they're doing Ramsey County as well. And you can just go and look and listen and read some of these covenants that were written and how they were written. TPT.org, that Jim Crow of the North documentary we just watched, you can watch the full thing online. It's about 55 minutes, but it really gives you some exposure to a lot of things that you may or may not have ever known were going on. Then the HREI Roundtable on policing that is coming up, that Officer Marks talked to you about on February 18th. Just listen to our police officers and the police chiefs talk about how are they going to do policing and what should that look like. And then the most important thing that I think all of us can do is pray. And that's something that, of course, we want to be part of, is praying for our country, praying for our community, praying for one another. If you have been around here this past year, you may have come into contact with our Now's the Time prayer events. And those were organized by our neighbor pastor, Pastor Satish Radhi, who's here tonight from Oasis Church. And this was a time for us to come together and pray as a community. And many of the faith leaders came, our police officers came, our mayors came, just an opportunity to be praying for our community. This year, her vision is that we move from that being just events that happen to all of us taking responsibility and making this a prayer movement, where we begin to pray about all the things going on in our community. And her vision is that we will take days or weeks or months as different churches and sign up to cover our community and our country in prayer. So those are all pieces that we can do as we seek to understand. And so tonight, if you're sitting here and feeling a little bit tense, because this is hard stuff, and you're wondering, where do I sit in this? What has my role been? What are my options? I might be scared by this. Maybe this brings up fear for me. Then I really want to invite you to spend some time, just pray about it. Look at what you can learn about it, and then sit down with somebody and begin to learn and listen. And we will find out that that fear isn't what runs us. That really it is when we get into the mode of caring one-on-one and loving one another that we can make changes. So we are going to invite you at this point to do some reflective work. And so for those of you who are here, our students are going to go and have some small group time when we're done with our live stream here. For those of you who are here as adults, we can do some small group time out there to just reflect on some questions. And for those of you who are joining us online, those questions are available. So if you're maybe sitting with a family member and want to reflect on this a little bit, the questions are online at faithchurchmn.org. And there's a button that says Love Seeks to Understand Questions. Go there, pick up those questions, and just do some self-reflection or reflection in your family. And so those are some of the actions that we're going to take together. I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Buck to talk to us a little bit about what's next for First Wednesday. And then if you would, I'd like you to pray for us tonight.
I'd love to. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie. Well, I hope tonight has opened eyes. I hope it's raised some questions. And I hope it's given us an opportunity for a way to go forward, at least at the very beginnings of that. And so we're glad everyone came. Thank you for joining us online. And we want to invite everyone back the first Wednesday of March, as we will be talking about how do we begin to leave money stress behind. And we will talk about all the things that money does to us. And so we invite you back for that in about a month. So with that, let me offer us a word of prayer, and then our streaming will be done, and then we'll move into some reflection time. So God, thank you for joining us here today. Thank you for the things you're doing in the city. And Lord, we ask that you would move us to our knees, to break down the things that are so ingrained in our society and in our hearts. And so, Lord, I ask you to break through, that we might find this way to be reconciled to one another out of the great love that you have for all of us. I ask that tonight in God's mighty name. Amen. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you in a month.